Hey, everybody. I can see you starting to come in. Wendy Battles is in the house. Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us. Cindy, Emma, Joe, Phil, Susie, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our first Ask Me Anything session. If you want to put in the chat where you are joining us from, that would be great. Hey, Stephen, Massachusetts. Drew, I am in Roswell, Georgia. If you're feeling extra sassy, you can tell us what the favorite thing about your city is. Right now in Roswell, the flowers are in bloom. The daffodils are in bloom. It's just really pretty. And we're still waiting on the pollen to set in. So it's the sweet spot. Hey, Cindy, Susie from Delaware, Ashley, tacos and the warm weather. Absolutely. I have never had New Haven, Connecticut pizza, Wendy. I need to go join. I need to go visit and have some of that. Okay, we will be getting started here in just a minute. Yes, New England does have gorgeous changing of the seasons. All right, it is a fairly short session today, so why don't we just go ahead and get started? Really appreciate everybody joining us today. I'd like to welcome you to the first Ask Me Anything series brought to you by the Living Security community. If you haven't already joined the community, David, would you mind putting the link into that so people can go ahead and join us? We have over 1,000 members, and every member is actually vetted. We are full of a lot of really nice collaborative human risk management professionals, and would love to have you join us if you're not already a member. So this Ask Me Anything series is an effort for us to get together monthly to hear what our leaders are working on in the industry and just to ask them questions. Cybersecurity threats are constantly changing, so we thought this would be a nice way for us to collaborate together. This session will be recorded and we will email it to you this week. And today we are joined by Living Security co-founders, Drew and Ashley Rose. The topic today is to chat about HRM and SAT. What is the difference? We would like to reiterate, we've seen in the industry that sometimes people use these terms synonymously, basically just like a rebranding. And we want to talk about how it is more than just semantics. So we'll be digging in that with you guys a bit today. So hi, Drew and Ashley. How are you?
Doing great, Jenny.
Good. Now I hear today is a special day for you. Drew, what day is that?
It is. And based on what you just said, part of our goal today is to dispel myths, right? We're to dispel myths that HRM is just a rebrand of security awareness training, but I felt like it was relevant to dispel another myth. Sometimes people ask, are you and Drew brother and sister? We are not. We do have the same last name. So I'm going to dispel this myth. Drew and I are married, and today is our 16th wedding anniversary. So thanks for celebrating our anniversary with us today.
Yeah, I heard somebody saying earlier, like, what a way to celebrate. And I was like, actually, I think for these two, there is nothing more romantic than to talk about human risk management. This is your sweet spot. So here we are. Thank you for celebrating with us and for helping dispel the myths, Ashley.
Well, I wouldn't say there's nothing more romantic than this, but it's been a while since Ashley and I have done a webinar or a presentation together. And so this is, I mean, it's probably been a couple of years when it used to be a lot more norm for us. So yeah, excited to dig in and kind of chat through our thoughts around, kind of HRM, where it came from, where it's going, what it means for you, and really give you an opportunity to ask any questions. And so if anyone's watched any of our HRM or BSAs before, I like to try to keep things super engaging. And so if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat. We can get to them pretty quickly. Jenny will be able to bring them up at the end. I'm not going to forget flowers, so appreciate that. And
Yeah, shout out to Anthony. You probably saved the day. So
let's get going. Let's get going.
Awesome. Yeah, let's dig in. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Drew. And thanks to our attendees. So I'm just gonna kick us off here with a quick intro, but we really do want to leave the majority of the time today for open-ended questions, ask me anything style. But just to kick us off, why are we here? We are seeing the human element increasingly become a bigger part of the risk landscape. And I think it's always been there. It's just more of a focus than ever before. A lot of people talk about the pandemic as being one of the big drivers. When people sort of moved outside of the safety of the four walls of the corporate environment and into their own homes, it certainly has changed the risk landscape, but the numbers have remained pretty consistent over the last decade. 75, 85, 90% of breaches rooted back in the humans. But I'm loving the focus that we're seeing from CISOs and from the community on how do we do this different, right? We can't continue to do the same thing and expecting a different result. So excited to dig into that. So let's just kind of lay a foundation, right? Where have we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? How do we think about like what security awareness is and where it stemmed from? So in its sort of earliest days, this came from a compliance mandate, right? We had our PCI, our SOX, our HIPAA, and these requirements still mandate security awareness and training. And I talk to people all the time. I think it's pretty interesting how it's very broad. These compliance requirements are very vague. It says you need to train everybody once a year, and it doesn't really give you very many specifics, although the industry itself has kind of really come into a mutual agreement on what are those human risks we need to cover. But traditionally, this is where most programs are stemming from. I'd say most programs today, tend to, especially those of you here, right, who have spent any time with living security, you've met compliance and you're ready to move beyond it. But I will say, especially as we think about some of the international, landscapes, there are still organizations that are standing up their first security awareness and training program. So that still exists today. A couple other notes. So we think about this as really being reactive. We talk to a lot of clients and they say, we've had an incident, or this group had a phishing attack. So we're now going to go train on X, Y, and Z, whatever that attack was focused on. That's, the definition of saying, okay, something happened. How do we respond to that? Not bad. It's just the nature of where programs have come from. Calendared, right? Typically this is happening once a year. It's predetermined. We know that, that we're going to be launching our campaigns. We help a lot of clients do that, focus on computer-based training. A lot of these are mandatory, right? We're not really getting pulled from our users to get training, but we're requiring it. So we're seeing mandatory buy-in. And it's really, in the very beginnings, we've seen this owned by a variety of departments. Sometimes it's HR, sometimes it is the security team. Maybe you're just hiring your first security awareness and training program owner, or you're having them share a responsibility with something else that's a part of the security organization. And ultimately what we're doing is checking the box. So we'll dive into a little bit more of these through our conversation, but Drew, how do we think about human risk management? How does this differ?
Yeah, so when we think about human risk management, really we put our primary goal at the forefront, right? Our primary goal as human risk managers is to reduce human risk. I mean, it's just that simple. In the past, on the left side, these were all very easy, check the box, I get something done and it's done and we leave it at that. But if we all can sit here and acknowledge that the human behaviors, risky human behaviors continue to put our organizations at risk, right? And cause incidents and breaches. and issues for our clients, our customers, our employees, right, our stock prices, then we should be focusing on the outcomes versus the tasks or the procedures that we're doing. And the outcome is risk management. It's a reduction in risky behavior. Human risk management is proactive. I think this is our superpower and how we differ from other cybersecurity tenants, where mostly is on the reactive side, right? It's either blocking in real time or it's focused on understanding what the exposure to an event was. And so being able to be more proactive around who's a risky person, what's a risky group, what are risky behaviors at our company, so we can get ahead of the potential event or breach. Again, that is a measurable outcome. Just-in-time continuous training. So, moving from once a year to maybe even once a month to very relevant and intentional training or content that is speaking to that person, maybe based upon their job title, maybe based upon real world events, maybe based upon the behaviors that we're seeing in their enterprise. That leads into kind of those targeted action plans. So, not just training, but what other actions can we take within an enterprise security infrastructure that can help reduce that risk. I like to call it, increasing and reducing the friction based upon the trustworthiness of an end user. Assessing that trustworthiness based upon different behaviors that we're seeing within an environment, and then changing different types of policies once we assess that trustworthiness. Peers understand business risk. I think we're moving from an area where we had the IT team that focused on cybersecurity, then we had the CISO's team that was the focus on cybersecurity. This kind of made the rise of the BISO, which was a person that was close to that business unit that also had a strong focus on cybersecurity. But what we're starting to see is more accountability to the business owners on the risk that their team brings to their enterprise. And so helping those business leaders and managers understand the business risk that is a part of the decisions that their employees are making, and then holding them accountable to that. Which part of a larger security strategy. Again, when we first started Living Security almost 7 years ago, the security awareness training program owner was typically kind of the redheaded stepchild, sitting at the little desk in the corner of the room saying, hey, I need this email written, or I need this PowerPoint done, or is the annual training complete yet? And what I'm here to tell you is that from a human risk management focus, you should be one of the most important players at the table. And you are able to prove that the work you're doing is having a greater impact than blocking, 1% more of the inbound threats on your email filter. It's run by the security team. Again, like we're taking, the focus on security awareness is not lost, right? There's different tools in this toolbox that we need to be able to execute, from a culture building, from an entertainment perspective, from gamification to communication. Those are all very important areas that are part of a human risk management strategy. But in the end, you're a security professional. Maybe you're not technical, maybe you are. But being able to speak the language, being able to focus on risk and prove your outcomes is going to get you a lot of power when it comes to requesting budget, requesting additional team members, and things of that sort. And measuring your impact. I've said this a bunch of times. So our first product that we sold at Living Security was a physical in-person escape room, and it was very much a very big risk to some of our initial clients that were like, hey, I'm paying $15,000-$20,000 for this experience, but what is this doing when it comes to risk? And for us, it was very hard to answer that question initially. But when we started doing some, kind of offline A/B testing, we were able to see some really interesting feedback around different behaviors that were changing for people that participated in those experiences. And so that has kind of been a major focus on human risk management is measuring the return on investment that you're bringing, whether through campaigns, investments, data, whatever it may be.
Thanks, Drew. I'm going to jump to one of the questions that Stephen asked as we kind of move into this next section, because I was going to get there anyway. So Stephen was asking, what are some of those big picture topics or ways that as an analyst or somebody that's on the security awareness or human risk team, how can we start kind of priming or laying the foundation for human risk management with our VPs and our executives? So one of the things that we felt was really, really important from an early stage was starting to influence the broader market that influences your executives, right? We know that they're reading Gartner's reports and Forrester's reports, and other like industry content that's out there, and that they couldn't just hear about it from human risk management from you or even from living security. They needed to hear about it otherwise. So we've been, spending a lot of time with Forrester and others trying to really define and articulate what human risk management is. What are those big picture topics that we should be thinking about as we move our program forward? So I'm really excited that, I think Forrester is on the cutting edge. They've been kind of leading this from an analyst perspective. But they talk about it's not just a name change, right? It's really a significant change of mindset, strategy, and process of how we solve an old problem with a new approach. One of the other pieces of content that just came out is the NIST CSF 2.0, where they added governance to part of the framework. And from our earlier slide, as we talked about, how do we drive business accountability? How do we actually, have these business conversations? How do we get a seat at the table? NIST is actually sharing this content out, and one of the tactics that they prescribe to being able to execute on the governance function is where risk management leaders do have a seat at the table. So one of my responses to you, Stephen, is going to be leverage this additional industry content. Living Security will share it. You'll see it from Forrester. You'll see some of the things from NIST that they're coming out with, but use the material where your executives are already spending time. They've already developed credibility to start priming these foundations for you. And then we've seen, Forrester and Living Security really breaking down human risk management into 4 key topics of how do you execute successfully on a program like this. The first is detecting and measuring human security behaviors and quantifying risk. So if we think about what we're doing from a metrics standpoint with, let's call it, a traditional security awareness and training program, and you may be running a phishing simulation program as well. So what are those behaviors that we can detect and quantify? Well, it really falls short of looking at all human behaviors that cause risk for an organization. You're detecting and measuring clicks, right, and report rates on essentially simulated training. So that's really not detecting and measuring actual behaviors that are happening in your environment. And there's many additional behaviors that we should be watching, right, and quantifying and measuring as part of the program. What are people doing online, things like that.
Yeah, maybe some of those examples, I'll just real quick. So I think some people were asking around what those behaviors are. So some additional metrics that you can start using today without any tools, things like 2-factor authentication adoption and password manager adoption, if those are tools that are in your environment that aren't required, or maybe they're optional. Things like your updating your devices in a timely fashion, measuring things like accessing malicious, uncategorized, or risky websites, or going against your policy, and just kind of starting to pick some of those, working with the other security leaders on your team, and asking for some of that data, creating some pivot charts and pivot tables within Excel, and trying to identify, hey, are there anybody that is doing these actions more than the rest of the company? Or are there any groups that are doing these actions more than the rest of the company? And there's, you can really pick anything that's on the top of your CISO's mind when it comes to what they're most worried about, and start doing some kind of data mining and trying to find something interesting within those data that you have a starting place. So like, okay, I just found out that the sales team, they don't use password managers at all, or, they use them 200% less than the average organizational unit at our company. That gives you an area of focus that you can work on to say, hey, I'm going to I'm going to focus on the sales team to try to get them to understand the value of using password managers. And because you have a very intentional focus area, then you can come back, 3, 6 months later and say, okay, are the sales team, did they adopt the password manager? Did my interventions or actions actually have that change that we were looking for?
Yeah, good points, Drew. And I think that leads us into number 2, right? The policy and training interventions on human risk. So obviously, in order to be able to take an action or respond to something, we need to first have a baseline. And that's where number 1 comes in. So do we have either integrations into the systems that are already getting the information, collecting the data, the telemetry on our users? So, right, your web application firewall, your DLP platform, your email security platform, your identity and access management platform, all of these tools are already collecting all this data on the user. So it's not like you're going to go create new data. You just need to tap into the data that you already have through integrations, or to Drew's point, if you don't have a platform in place, being able to get spreadsheets or having things, brought into like a Tableau or some sort of like business intelligence system is a way to get access to those data to start baselining. But from there, then we need to be able to respond in a proactive and a very targeted manner based on the behavior. And this is really where we start seeing a very large shift from what we've traditionally been doing with our training programs, which is I'm going to send training on this concept to all people at the same time, right? And so now we're saying, okay, I'm going to send training on this concept to these people at the right time. And being able to do this type of dynamic training or response has been proven to be much more effective, not only from engaging that audience, and changing their behavior, but then you're also not training people on material where they're not actually performing those negative behaviors. And therefore, you're able to reduce some of the training fatigue that your end users are likely experiencing today. And so, that you had asked the question, Stephen, I want to draw this back to the AMA, but how do we move the needle? How do we start maturing? One of the first places that we see organizations take that next step, it's actually from more of a strategic approach of how they're training. So if we're thinking about what do we want to do this next quarter, who are we going to train? It's password month. Should we just talk about passwords? Or, it's social engineering on the calendar, so we're going to send that out. So they're starting to shift their mindset away from let's continue to follow our calendar to let's identify those highest risk cohorts or groups of users, understand the behaviors that we're really looking to change, and let's put a more strategic action plan in place or training plan in place and start measuring if we're seeing a difference 30, 60, and 90 days later. So that is a very somewhat easy way or kind of light way with pretty low friction. If you start going to your CISO and saying, hey, I want to train, I think we should target these groups on this concept because we've seen these things, you should likely get met with a very positive response versus trying to jump all the way to, hey, I'm going to go talk to the SOC and start changing this policy. That's probably not going to be the easiest way to step into human risk management, although we are seeing a lot of programs go in that direction. Drew, do you want to add anything there or cover number 3?
No, I mean, I would definitely, we have about 8 minutes left and we have some open-ended questions. So I'd like to kind of cover a couple of those real quick. Alex had a question around the types of communications that work best to hold business owners accountable on risk. So what we're seeing, especially in the enterprise, is a move to the enterprise messaging for security, human risk communications. And so we find most organizations have a little bit more leeway, in using Slack or Microsoft Teams to do those reach outs and to continue this, have those conversations. I think, as a product company, we're doing a lot of work in trying to leverage enterprise messaging as the place that human risk is managed, whether it comes from, informing end users or managers about their risk or providing different types of content or links to them that they can use to understand what that risk is, and then trying to get to some sort of automation using those channels.
Let's jump back to Cindy. She had a great question. And we're seeing many different examples of this across the industry. So she said, at my organization, we're the cybersecurity training and awareness team. We have a GRC office that's adjacent to our team. If we were to rebrand, how does that fit in? So yeah, Cindy, great question. Sometimes we're just seeing an individual that's responsible for the program advocate for a title and program change, but we're not seeing organizational structures shifting right off the bat. So that could be a first step, right? Maybe it's just your title is changing to a human risk program owner or human risk manager. Those are some title examples that we're seeing in our space right now, but the reporting structure and all of that still remains the same. We have seen more recently, over the last 12 months, where actually some of the human risk management programs are getting brought up and put under the GRC team. So it's under the broader risk management umbrella in the organization, which I think is a really great spot to sit as well. Typically a strong, connection, it's either under the CISO's org or under maybe the chief risk officer, if you have one in your organization, could fit under the risk organization, but either place, it can work well. The number one most important thing, no matter where you sit, right, which team, which umbrella you're under, is that you have either a seat at the table or you have other stakeholders, other adjacent stakeholders that you either have influence over or they're open to a conversation to leverage some of their influence to help you drive the program forward. One of the things that we talk about, maybe I'll share my screen again really quick, and I think Jenny, you dropped this in the chat, but we talk about this maturity model, and we released a maturity model last year. And one of the things you're talking about is here up under the culture. It's talking about, alignment and then what the security organization looks like and where this program fits in. So why is that so important? Because over and over again, we see people getting, blocked of being able to mature or drive the program forward if they do not have stakeholder buy-in, if they do not have senior leadership buy-in. And so if you're sitting in an organization like that, are you just, SOL? I'll tell you no, and here's why. Because what we've been able to show in multiple examples is that you can actually mature any of these categories without the other. And oftentimes what will happen is as you start maturing in process or maturing in technology, and you actually start getting some of the traction around the metrics and the ROI and the impact that Drew spoke about earlier, that can actually help drive the culture forward. And then vice versa, if you have a really strong buy-in from senior leadership, you have strong culture, that's a really great foundation to start building upon with technology and process. So it doesn't have to be all things at once. You need to identify where you are today, figure out what's the easiest next step, and then figure out ways to start intertwining some of the work or the output, the metrics that you're doing into some of the workflows that are already pre-existing within your organization, right? If you have a senior leadership meeting, how do we add a human risk metric to the metrics that we're already talking about in our scorecard, right? There's little ways to start intertwining that.
Yeah, I think with 3 minutes left, maybe, is there any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. Oh, there's another question from Alex. Yeah, so is Living Security taking the business owner security risk balance into account when thinking about creating action plan communications? Yeah, absolutely. So, the question is, so here, I'll give you a couple examples. So one of the things that we do with our product is being able to show business leaders how they stack up against other business leaders from a risk perspective. And so that kind of just minor gamification really motivates and incentivizes these leaders to again, take that accountability and start doing something about it. Nobody wants to be at the bottom of that list. Traditionally, it's been very hard to go show these business leaders like, oh, you say I'm risky. Well, I mean, phishing, that's simulated phishing isn't enough for me to really like get buy-in that my team is riskier than someone else's. And so giving them a more holistic view and exactly what their employees are doing within their environments that shows and proves that they are more risky, gets their buy-in. Okay, here's something that I can change. Um, and then they can take action on their own. The program owners, the human risk managers can take action on their own. There's really a lot of different ways that you can slice it up based upon your culture and how you're able to go through these different launch these different actions.
Yeah, I want to expand on that for Alex's question. So one of the things that we believe will happen as programs start maturing, and we've seen this in some of the more mature organizations, is that what's the output of the human risk team becomes more of a pull versus a push approach. And so as we think about business ownership around risk and being able to deliver very specific business unit scorecards, you can imagine where the head of sales or the head of finance is actually now working with the security team to say, okay, I don't want to be at the bottom, so what can I do? Right? What type of communication or action plans can we put in place? Can you come do a webinar and talk to my team about this particular risk that you're seeing in my area of the organization? And so that's a really strong way or a good indicator that your culture is maturing. And then it won't be, you'll be able to take that kind of risk balance approach where we're not sending action plans and communications about all things, because that creates a lot of noise, but we're being very specific and strategic about what behaviors we're looking to influence at the right time.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we're just about running out of time, and I just wanted to kind of take a moment to just let you guys know, like our objective with kind of pushing the human risk management narrative isn't just to sell more product. Obviously, we love to sell the products that we have, but we really look at it as this maturity of our maturity of this world where human risk managers can have more value, make more money, get more budget, and have more resources to do their job. We truly believe that the human risk manager is one of the most important roles within a CISO's organization. And we're just getting to this time where we can go out and prove this. And so my encouragement is to ask questions, go onto LinkedIn, type in human risk managers, find people that have gone through that title shift, that have gone through that organizational change, and ask them how it's going. And the people and the clients that we work with, they are getting more dollars, they are getting more staff, they are changing their title, and they're getting a better perspective from their security peers, where again, they're not that person sitting in the elementary school chair, copywriting emails, which is important. But what's more important is reducing risk and proving the effectiveness of your program. Ashley, do you have anything else to share?
No, I think we're gonna continue to stay at this until those stats change, right? Until the human is not the #1 driver of security breaches. Like, I think that's when we know our work is maybe not done, because the cyber criminals will never sleep, but that's what we're aiming for. And I definitely will give a shout out to Jenny. Jenny, thank you for moderating this, but also thank you so much for your conviction and enthusiasm around the community. As Drew said, you want to go and find others that have done this before you. The community is a fantastic place to do that. People are very open. We do curate really strong conversations, and you're certainly able to find kind of counterparts at other organizations that have walked this path. So we will do this again. And next time we're going to go deeper into other areas of HRM. We tried to keep this broad strokes today. So if you're looking for more kind of specific anecdotes or use cases, or even like a deeper dive into the behaviors, I know there was a lot of questions around that, which we shared our insights page. Please come back and join us next month. Sometimes it'll be me, sometimes it'll be Drew, sometimes it may be a surprise guest. But thank you all for attending today, and see you next month.
Thank you so much. Happy anniversary, guys.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.